I often wonder how different our world would be if certain historical events never happened. The Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in 1979 was one such pivotal moment that shaped the course of history. But what if it never occurred? Today, we're going to explore this fascinating alternate timeline and its potential consequences for the world as we know it. It's important to remember that while we can't change the past, understanding these key moments can give us valuable insights into the present and future. Understanding these key moments can give us valuable insights into the present and future. To understand the significance of this what-if scenario, we first need to grasp why the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan in the first place. It wasn't a decision made lightly. The Soviets were concerned about the stability of their southern border and the potential spread of Islamic fundamentalism. They also wanted to prop up the communist government in Kabul, which was facing increasing resistance from various rebel groups. In our alternate timeline, let's imagine these voices prevailed, and the Soviets decided against military intervention. This decision would have far-reaching consequences that we'll explore throughout this video. The Soviet invasion of Afghanistan was a major turning point in U.S. Soviet relations. It led to increased tensions, an American-led boycott of the 1980 Moscow Olympics, and a significant escalation in U.S. support for anti-Soviet forces around the world. Without this invasion, the 1980s might have looked very different. It's possible we might have seen a continuation of the détente policies of the 1970s. The U.S. and Soviet Union could have found more common ground, potentially leading to earlier arms reduction treaties or even a less antagonistic end to the Cold War. The lack of conflict in Afghanistan could have allowed both superpowers to redirect resources towards domestic issues or other international cooperation. But what about Afghanistan itself? Without the Soviet invasion and the subsequent decade of war, Afghanistan's trajectory could have been radically different. The country might have avoided the devastating conflict that left an estimated 562,000 to 2 million civilians dead and millions more displaced. In this alternate timeline, we might see an Afghanistan that had the chance to develop its institutions, economy, and civil society without the interruption of prolonged warfare. It's possible that by today it could have been a stable, moderately prosperous nation, a far cry from the war-torn country we know. For instance, Afghanistan's literacy rate, which was around 18% in 1979, might have grown steadily instead of stagnating due to war. The Soviet-Afghan War drew thousands of foreign fighters to Afghanistan, including Osama bin Laden, and led to the creation of Al-Qaeda. Without this war, the landscape of global terrorism could look very different today. It's possible that without this conflict, groups like Al-Qaeda might never have formed, potentially altering the course of events leading up to 9/11 and beyond. The Afghan War had a profound impact on the Soviet Union itself. It's often referred to as Soviet Union's Vietnam, a costly and demoralizing conflict that contributed to the erosion of public faith in the government. The war drained the Soviet economy, costing an estimated 15 billion rubles annually, and exposed weaknesses in its military and political system. Without this albatross around its neck, could the Soviet Union have survived longer? It's possible. To really understand the impact of this alternate history, we need to consider it on a personal level. Think about the millions of Afghans who wouldn't have had their lives upended by war. One such story could be that of Fatima, a fictional Afghan woman. In this alternate world, she might have become a doctor in Kabul, contributing to her country's development. Or consider Dmitry, a young Soviet man who, instead of being conscripted to fight in Afghanistan, pursued his dreams of becoming an engineer, helping to modernize Soviet industry. These personal stories highlight the profound impact of war on individual lives. The ripple effects of a non-invasion would extend far beyond Afghanistan and the Soviet Union. Pakistan, for instance, might not have become a frontline state in the Cold War, potentially altering its relationship with the U.S. and its internal politics. Iran, without a war-torn neighbor to its east, might have followed a different path in its post-revolution years. The United States, without the confidence boost of winning the Afghan proxy war, might have approached the end of the Cold War differently. And without the experience of supporting the Afghan Mujahideen, U.S. intelligence agencies might have developed along different lines, with significant implications for future conflicts and foreign policy decisions. So what can we learn from this exercise in alternate history? Perhaps the most important lesson is the long-term, often unforeseen consequences of military interventions. The Soviet decision to invade Afghanistan set in motion a chain of events that continues to shape our world today, in ways that the Soviet leadership could never have anticipated. It also highlights the importance of diplomatic solutions and the potential costs of militarizing foreign policy. In our alternate timeline, a Soviet Union that chose diplomacy over invasion might have found more constructive ways to achieve its strategic goals, both in Afghanistan and globally. As we conclude our journey through this alternate history, it's worth reflecting on how often the course of history hinges on single decisions. The Soviet invasion of Afghanistan was one such moment, a crossroads where history could have taken a very different path. While we can't change the past, understanding these pivotal moments can help us make better decisions for the future. As we've seen, the decision to invade Afghanistan had consequences that extended far beyond the borders of that country or the time frame of the war itself. It shaped the world we live in today in countless ways. By examining this alternate history, we gain a deeper appreciation for the interconnectedness of global events and the long-term impacts of the choices we make. Thank you for joining me on this journey through a history that never was, but one that has much to teach us about the history that did unfold. Until next time, stay informed and stay curious.